To sliš se? Okay. So, hello everyone. We will start with this workshop. Unless somebody is waiting for someone and would like that we shift the start for a few minutes, or we are okay and we can start? Okay. So, hello everyone, my name is Nate Bezak. I come from the University of Ljubljana and I'm one of the fellows. So most of you have not seen me like in person since I have not yet attended any of the previous meetings. But I will at least today present or start this workshop about the sustainable work-life balance. So this is a very important topic in all parts of the society, also in academia. So we will have this workshop composed from two parts. So first part will be like two invited speakers. The second part will follow after that with a roundtable discussion with some of the fellows from other university also involved. So in order not to be too long, I would like to invite Ms. Jovana Mihajlović-Trboc, who is a political scientist dealing with political issues from perspective of culture studies. So her primary research field is the politics of the past and public memory of the crimes which happened during the dissolution of Yugoslavia and during the Second World War. She is especially focused on the impact of the International Criminal Tribunal for former Yugoslavia on the post-Yugoslav states, as well as the reproduction of the historical narratives in the school textbooks. So another line of her research work deals with issues of gender equality in academia, position of women scientists from socialism until today, and integrating gender dimension into research. She's a member of the Commission for Equal Opportunity in Science and consultative expert body nominated by the Ministry of Education, Science and Sport of the Republic of Slovenia. So please, Dr. Jovana, please.
Hello. So thank you for the nice introduction. I just would like to mention that the second speaker today, Professor Andrea Gomboz, was the president of the Commission for Equal Opportunities in Science. We just ended its mandate, so the new commission will be formed soon. We just finished ours. Let me introduce myself in the sense why I'm here today. As you heard, I'm a political scientist dealing with a lot of other research questions. But due to necessity of looking for a job after my postdoc, which was connected with the topic of dealing with the past, war crimes and so on, I happened to fall into a range of European projects very similar to the EUTOPIA one. Projects like Garcia, R&I Peers, ACT, and now Inspire, which are dealing with different aspects of gender equality in science. And the position of women in science, minority groups, precariousness of position of young people in science. So all of these very relevant issues relating to people who do academia as a work. So it was not intentionally my plan in life was not really to deal with this issue. However, I became very involved in it and very interested in researching it. It became also a passion of mine. And I'm now, so I was involved in creating, preparing, and now implementing gender equality plan for the research center of the Slovenian Academy of Sciences and Arts, the institution where I work. And now I'm acting as a gender equality officer in addition to my research associate position, gender equality advisor at the ZRC SAZU, that is the complicated acronym of our research center. This position is like sort of in-house consultant to the to the management of the research center and for the researchers who have no experience with gender and would like to involve gender dimension into their research, because this is increasingly becoming a requirement at ERC and other competitive calls. So this is me. And in the process of creating gender equality plan, my team and I created a survey for staff, for the employees of the research center, ZRC. And in the process of analyzing the results, we found some results that we expected and some results that were less to be expected, but which quite nicely reflect what we found out in other parts of our research that were more qualitative based. So we did focus groups, interviews, and systemic analysis for quite some time of the whole academic environment in Slovenia. So what I'm going to tell you today is basically how work-life balance issues play out differently for different people that work in academia, in an academic institution. And Research Center of Slovenian Academy of Sciences and Arts is quite representative because it's a relatively large center. It's the biggest research center for the humanities in Slovenia. Further, I'm going to explain how this issue is of work-life balance, or what we call the work-life balance, is partially gendered. It is a matter of gender inequalities, the way that gender is relevant for both work and private life, but is also partially, and it may be increasingly so, influenced by working conditions in academic sector. I'm going to dwell on this precisely, the type of working conditions that are dictated by the by project led financing of research that is increasingly becoming dominant in the research centers throughout Europe. Majority of the findings that I'm going to present today are presented in the article that just came out in Družboslovne razprave, which is the journal published by Faculty of Social Sciences of the University of Ljubljana. So our survey had a good response rate and is quite representative for the research center, ZRC, which is like many humanities institution, has actually a majority of women. So when we talk about gender equality in certain disciplines like social sciences, certain fields of medicine, everything to do with social care, social work, education, these are increasingly women-dominated professions. So when we talk about gender equality or inequality, it is hard to just follow, the narrow binarism of how many women, how many men in decision-making positions or in full professorship and so on. But the situation is more nuanced, and I'm going to present these nuances. So trust me, the survey is representative for the whole population that we analyzed. The main survey results are to some extent expected. Let's say maybe I was expecting a bit more of dissatisfaction. So overall opinion of the employees is quite positive about the level of gender equality at the ZRC. And this is, I think, partially precisely due to the fact that this is women-dominated institution. So the gender issues are not on the surface. Therefore, if you ask people directly, they would tell you, well, everything is fine. However, when you dig deeper, you find problems. So women noted gender disparity and deprivation in higher rate than men. while majority of respondents would say that there is no significant disadvantages or disparity in advantage between genders, when differences were noted, they were more often noted to the advantage of men. So in many ways, these are typical gendered inequalities that you can find in academia. And the biggest difference in opinions is always between senior male and junior female researchers. And of course, the statistics practically on the level of the whole European Union shows that, the higher we go to the academic ladder, there are proportionally less and less women to find. Therefore, it is no surprising to find that senior male researchers are most satisfied with the status quo. They generally would not change a thing. And they are least prone to recognize that women are disadvantaged. So I'm presenting some of this data here. So, for instance, almost 95% of senior male researchers agree or completely agree with the statement that men and women are treated equally at the ZRC SAZU, while junior female researchers share that opinion at a significantly lower rate. So it's just above 70% of them agree or completely agree. Further, this is, of course, so when we look more nuanced, in more detail into these gendered inequalities in academia, we see that the starkest contrast in opinion between senior male and junior female researchers is on the issue of whether men and women have equal career opportunities for career advancement. Of course, so this is the point on which opinions diverge most. And then when you look into what are actually criteria for career advancement, then you realize that many of these criteria are actually very often colliding with what we call private life. So for instance, one of the requirements for advancement into higher academic titles is certain period of time that a person should spend at a foreign academic institution on a study stay. Another research done by Mirjana Ole in 2004 actually found that for a quarter of women, this is the main obstacle in attaining the higher position, and it is precisely in the period of career, late 30s, when most of academic women have children or have young children, and therefore for them traveling and staying abroad is very complicated because it requires either taking your small children with you and, for instance, not having covered childcare abroad, or not having children, or so deciding not to have children, or deciding to leave your children at home, which is also for many women unfortunate decision. And the same research from 2004 showed that only 8% of men have the same kind of obstacle. So somehow for men, this is more easy to doable. Another previous research that I'm quoting here by Maca Jogan, who is a senior sociologist here in Slovenia, and in many ways she started research on this topic in Slovenia. She showed that the biggest obstacle to scientific advancement for female academics is precisely family caring duties. What our research also showed, that when you ask people in open-ended questions, like, do you have a suggestion for improvement, women have a lot of very diverse, detailed ideas, while male colleagues usually have some very generic recommendations, like raising awareness or something like that. However, what we did not expect to find in our research is a difference among women that are working as researchers and women that are working as administrative staff. And it turned out that biggest difference, this disparity in their opinions, is precisely on topic in relation to the challenges of balancing work and private life. So their level of satisfaction is statistically significantly different, whether, when they are asked whether private life and care work contribute to their disadvantaged position, more women in research, so more scholars, women scholars agree with this than administrative staff. And this actually, then when we combine this data with other data, a focus group of interviews, we found out that there is a very big importance in structural position a person has within the larger scheme, within larger structure of academia. So when we analyzed, for instance, difference between these two groups, women in research and women in academia, some differences are of course expected because there is a difference in nature and working mode. So women in administration work from office, work 8 hours, their contracts are tied not to a single project, but to an institution. Therefore, their employments are, by the rule, more stable. Though their working conditions are less flexible, they generally do not bring work home. And precisely different position or working mode is for people in academia, as you know. It is more flexible, you can work from home, from wherever, but very often there is no limitation on actual working hours. Working from home is has become a standard. And there is also a porous limitation between what is actually work time and what is private time. People tend to identify with their work to much higher extent, and very often social occasions are at the same time work-related occasions. So this is expected. However, we found out that this difference is much severed by the rules of academic market that are increasingly becoming relevant when we talk about working conditions of people in academia. So stability and type of employment, but stability in its wider sense, influences individuals' perception of their work environment. So while the lack of stable funding is generally acknowledged by both people in academia, in administration, and in the research, it creates specific types of challenges for researchers. For instance, project work generates additional administrative and management workload that needs to be done, while research work still needs to be done. So this practically means that what we traditionally considered to call academic work, so writing papers, reading other scholar works, doing editorial work, this kind of work that could be easily done remotely is very often shifted to the private time, because the work time is used on what one of our colleagues called bureaucratic legwork. So a huge amount of meetings, administrative synchronization, filling out reports, timesheets, schedules, planning future projects, Zoom meetings, and so on, which practically means that you go to work to do the administrative job while you stay at home to do the academic work. But then the home becomes a new or second office. And this is what we found in the quotations in our interviews and open-ended questions to the surveys. So this increasingly is becoming a problem that is also recognized as, that is conflicting with not only private time, but ability to have a normal family work, family life. Freudian slip. So another problem of project type of working is that scholars are in a way forced to do what the scholarly work for which they got the project. So you apply with 10 applications, and the statistics say that if you apply with 10 projects, you will get one. In practice, this means that people often have to jump from one research topic to another. You see me, expert in war crimes, now expert in gender equality. This is not necessarily a bad thing. What is bad about it is that a researcher is not in a position of power to choose their research agenda and to follow the continuity of publication work. As you all know, publications sometimes have a 2-year turnaround period. So by the time when you are publishing on one topic, you are already working on another topic, and very often much of your work never gets published in a way that you would like. So you lose this continuity and accumulation of academic capital, symbolic capital. However, also male researchers are noticing the same kind of challenges. What one of male researchers pointed out, that this is not just a problem of work and life balance, this is problem of health, and specifically mental health, which is deteriorating in conditions of continuous instability. Also our research survey, which is generally showing that gender is most statistically relevant variant, we found certain gradual differentiation, particularly in opinions on gender equality issues, that is distributed along continuums. So senior male researchers are most satisfied and least prone to change, then junior male researchers, then senior female, and the most dissatisfied and most alarmed are junior female researchers. And we are I'm giving several potential explanations, and probably none of them is singularly explanative. So I think that there is generally a generational shift in understanding gender norms, gender regimes, and what is expected behavior from men and women that is happening also among younger men. So other types of other statistics, for instance, OECD statistic on the number of minutes men spend in doing unpaid housework has shown two things. First, Slovenia is the top. Second, this is data from 2014. And second, that this number of minutes is slowly increasing year after year. However, the COVID pandemic, again, made a setback. And still, of course, this number of minutes is less than the number of minutes women are doing unpaid work. So there is a generational shift, I would say. However, I think even more important is that junior male researchers are increasingly are in precarious work positions compared to senior and older men. And therefore, they are more prone to recognize these structural inequalities that are only partially gendered. So I would like to conclude that this increasing precariousness of academic employment and project-based work is creating workplace dynamics and different hierarchies in status and privileges that are really relevant and should be taken into account when we want to understand how people perceive what is fair or unfair, what is equal, and how to remedy the situation so we would come to a more equal academia. I don't think that there is a single solution, but any kind of a solution needs to take into account this very increasingly changing academic setting that people are working in, and which are influencing both their professional and private life. So now I'm going to explain the concept from the title of my presentation. This shift towards neoliberal agenda and structural changes in the way higher education and research are funded are caused by several factors. The main one being that there is a decrease in public investment or public financing of both research and higher education. So the research institutions are therefore forced to seek external funding to go into market, and this is introducing marketization, business-oriented management models. In higher education, it is producing increased pressure to treat students as customers, to increase the number of payable academic courses, and therefore to evaluate the academic output of teachers by their profit-making abilities. This is combined, so this focus on profitability is combined with, in general, increase focus on productivity and excellence, and the way we defined excellence today in academia is increasingly competitive. It's focused on numerical values, numerical evaluation mechanisms which are repetitive, which are constant. Therefore, there is not a moment of achieving a benchmark and then dedicating to your academic work, but this is a constant pressure which becomes even more important than academic work itself. This kind of setting is labeled academic capitalism or neoliberal academy. Whatever way you want to call it, this project-based financing is creating unstable and precarious working conditions for a younger generation of people working in academia, who are becoming sort of working class academic workforce, which is alienated in the same way that proletariat is alienated, if you want to borrow from Marxist scholarship. So I'm not sure to what extent the concept of projectariat is really useful, but what I want to say is that this is something that is increasingly becoming relevant and needs to be taken into account when we talk about new generations and concepts like equality and fairness. Thank you very much.
So, are there any questions, perhaps, from the audience? Somebody?
Thank you. It was very interesting. So I was wondering, in your survey, have you looked into some different parameters, let's say within the same gender and career stage groups, like, for example, private situation, whether they are single or they have a family life, and how this potentially affect their work-life balance and how they sense their work environment and these inequalities, and does it help or the opposite?
Thank you. So our research was very limited, so we didn't have that variable. But of course, I compared it with other surveys. The biggest one was done in UK. It was called ASET survey, and it was focusing on STEM, so science, engineering, mathematics universities or departments, and it showed, yes, to a large extent, the family situation, especially for women, is relevant, and it's more relevant for women than for men. However, this is not only gendered issue, and other research and also our qualitative research showed that there is a sort of class issue that needs to be taken into account, because women of certain income or certain socioeconomic background could more easily afford unpaid or lower paid care work or housework. Also, the issue of migration is relevant. If you are a migrant, you usually don't necessarily have access to wider family who very often is doing this unpaid care work, for instance, in Slovenia. So this is, for sure, this is relevant and is even more increasing inequalities. Anything more?
Just a terminological question, because there are people from various international universities here. So I was wondering how exactly you guys defined seniority, so junior versus senior scholars in your survey, just because in Slovenia we have this system where there are ranks and then there are contracts and career stages and all this.
Yeah. Well, we, in our survey, we intentionally used self-declaration and not an objective criteria. Because what it turns out in specific situation of research center of ZRC SAZU is that most of people are basically trapped in a mid-level academic position. However, some of them, for various reasons, stay long enough that they attain other kind of symbolic academic positions of power, like coordinating a project, deciding on spending institutional budget, and so on. So academic title is not always necessarily quite important, the most important criteria. For European researches, which are comparative, and these data are collected in SHE figures, you can find it, it's coming every 2 years. The system, they are comparing statistical data from all EU member countries and associated countries, and they have system of A, B, C, D. Where A level is, I think, the highest level, and then it is translated to particular system relevant for every country. So I think that both are equally important. For us, it was more important how people actually perceive their position as junior or senior. Okay, thank you.
So thanks for this nice presentation. So now we'll have a second presentation. So that will be carried out by Professor Andrea Gomboc, that received her PhD in the University of Ljubljana and then did her Marie Curie fellowship at the Liverpool John Moores University in UK. Currently she's professor of astronomy at the University of Nova Gorica in Slovenia, where she's leading Slovenian precipitation in the Vera Rubin Observatory, legacy survey of space and time. So her main fields of research are astrophysical transients, in particular tidal disruptions of stars in vicinity of massive black holes, and gamma ray burst. So she teaches several astronomy courses at undergraduate and graduate level and is active in science communication and popularization. In the period from 2018 till 2022, she was the president of the Slovenian Commission for Equal Opportunity in Science. And for a bit shorter period, she was the president of the Council for Science and Technology of the Republic of Slovenia. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. I would like to thank the organizers for the invitation. So you may be wondering what is an astrophysicist doing here, talking about work-life balance. So I think I was invited because of my recent column in the Slovenian newspaper Delo, which I gave the title Academic Wheel. So let's slow down the academic wheel, and in which I discussed basically difficulties that people who are at the same time teachers or teaching assistants and researchers and work at universities, how they handle this, or the difficulties that they have in juggling this, all the demands in their work life, as well as, of course, also their private life obligations, or just the other things that they might want to do in their private life. So as it was pointed out, I worked for about 20 years at the University of Ljubljana, where I had the full teaching load, which means 6 hours of teaching per week. And of course, this then, in addition to that, you have to prepare for lectures, you have to talk with the teaching assistant, you have to deal with oral and written exams and so on. So in the end, it was expected that I spent half of my time working on pedagogical duties and half on my research. Of course, so now I work at a more research-oriented university where I teach less, but I'm also expected to bring in more research money. So I think I can now say that I understand both worlds, just purely a university one, where often people think that your permanent position is really permanent, because if you do the teaching, the salary comes in. But the fact is that if you do not do research, then you don't have research output, and then you have difficulties when your next habilitation comes in, so you can in principle lose your position. So it is not really permanent until you reach the position of a full professor. So this is this drawback that for a bit more stable position, you have to do a lot of teaching, which then, although it may be very nice for you, you like it, you like working with students, as I do, for example, but it really messes up, so to say, your time schedule. You cannot really focus on the research work. So sometimes you then think, I will catch up during summer holidays, but during summer holidays also the kids have holidays, and everyone is relaxed, so it is very difficult. Personally, I never caught up during summer holiday, and I don't know anyone actually who did. Yes, so in addition to teaching, I think there are many things that I think we do share, people in research institutes and at universities. So there are many academic duties many administrative duties that come along. You apply for projects, you do mentorship, basically sometimes you also do activities like to promote your research area or your institution. So all this really adds up to so much that you cannot fill this in the regular time schedule. So in the end, 8 hours of work per day is more of a dream than a reality. In my field of research, we are also involved in many international collaborations, because I think that research is international, and especially in fields like astrophysics, we have more and more let's say, expensive and complicated equipment, so therefore we need more and more, so more countries join in. So also just participating and being on top of what is going on in international collaboration, it takes a lot of time. So I think we all know how this ends. So it ends in the way that we work late in the night, we work over weekends, we don't expect any pay, especially extra pay for that. And we often neglect our personal needs, our private life, like hanging out with friends or going for a walk or doing some sports and so on, which would be good for us. So why do we do this? You may wonder, because we are intelligent people, right? Or we think we are. I think this is one type of what is called passion exploitation. So where people do things because they like doing them, or they think it is their call. Like it is very often in highly creative professions, but also I think in academia the conditions are very ripe or very right for such kind of behavior, because the expectations in the community they become our own expectations. So we basically do this because we think this is good for our career, it is good for our research group, it is good for our research field, for the institution, and we don't question these assumptions anymore. So it's not necessarily that we have a boss, somebody who is forcing us to do this, but we always have in our mind that in order to get another project or in order to get a habilitation, we need to have results. We need to have research papers published, and this is what is driving us. It's not really that we do this voluntarily, it is just the expectations which became our own expectations. Yes, so this often can lead to burnout in academia. For example, there was a UK research in UK in 2001, education support it was called, which really, the findings were really worrying. So there are 2,000 people who work at British universities participated, and for example, 6 out of 10 regularly work for more than 40 hours per week, and 2 out of 10 more than 50 hours per week. 8 out of 10 said that they are often working very intensively and under unrealistic time pressures. So there are many more worrying results like that. For example, 8 out of 10 think that their mental health is suffering and it is not important for their institutions. And for example, also I think half of them, if I remember correctly, often feel that at the end of the day they are really exhausted emotionally and physically, and also I think one interesting was also that I cannot remember. Let me try to find it. Just a moment. Yeah, half shows signs of depression, and yeah, about a third of them often or very often neglect their personal needs due to work demands. And feel really exhausted. So this is very worrying. I don't know if, I'm not aware that there will be a research like that, survey like that done in Slovenia, but it would be interesting to see that. Jovana mentioned also gender and the problem of that women face more often. I acknowledge that there is this problem of a postdoc, as we call it in Slovenia, so that people are expected to go abroad for a certain period of time. This has been often pointed out as a big problem in advancement of women in their careers. From my personal experience, my postdoc in UK was what I would call career forming. Without this postdoc, I would not be here because I would not get connections, experience, and so on. So I would strongly recommend such experience abroad, because then you are really embedded in some international environment, you make connections which you can then bring home and continue working with these people and develop new connections. So, because I truly believe that all research is international, not only astrophysics, but all research, there is no Slovenian science, let's say, or German science. So it is all international science, and it should be, everything that we do should be embedded in this international community. Of course, having said that, I think that so it should be encouraged that people go on a postdoc, but abroad. But at the same time, we should leave room for exceptions, for really exceptional circumstances when this is not possible. Not only women, also many men have caring responsibilities. It is not just children that we need to take care of. By the way, every child has also a father, not just a mother. But it's not just children. It can be old parents who are getting old. It could be a spouse who is ill, or it could be like friends, siblings. So all these caring responsibilities should be somehow acknowledged, and we should make room that people who have them can still pursue academic career. And also just people who don't have any of these caring responsibilities, and they are single, free, but still they don't have to work 12 hours per day. So they should have also private life to do whatever they want to do in this time. What is maybe also in a way more often a problem of women is, for example, a two-body problem, when two persons pursue a career in academia, and it often happens that women's career is then sidetracked to the men's career. Also, I think in recent years, when we are promoting women in science, so that means that there is more work on the shoulders of women. So they have to serve as role models. They have to serve sometimes on different committees to just to have the balance, gender balance there. And all this, of course, takes time. In addition, so we are expected also for women are expected to help women who are at lower positions, right? Why not men? Men could do that even better because they hold more important and leadership positions. Then also here are also expectations, for example, for women who are immigrants. So they are double times, because immigrants are expected to have this transnational care, that they help their friends or people from their countries. They often feel less empowered, and as well as we should acknowledge that it may be very difficult to have an academic career for people who are from some ethnical groups, minority groups, people with disabilities, and so on. So we have really a lot of work here, at least in Slovenia, to do that. What I think it is slowly perhaps going to change, I hope, is that, for example, people are talking more about that. We are talking here today because I remember 20 years ago when I was struggling with all this, there was basically no one to talk to about that. So I've heard that recently there was this agreement on a reforming research assessment signed, and also University of Ljubljana joined it. I think also other Slovenian universities will join soon. So it points in the right direction, I would say. So it is pointing more in the direction that we should produce less paper, less output, but of higher quality. Of course, we'll see how this turns out. And also that we should appreciate or take into account all the different contributions that people make. It's not just research papers, it's also teaching, it's administrative, it's helping the community, and so on. Yeah, so I think in the end this change could then benefit all, not just women, not just young people, but everyone to have a really better life, work life and private life balance. Thank you.
So are there any questions perhaps for Professor Andrea?
Thank you very much for this inspiring talk. I was wondering what your vision is on the use of teamwork as a way to assess progress in science, which might then also lead to, for example, academic people saying, I'm going to work 4 out of 5 days because the team will make sure that we move forward in science, while now it's almost unthinkable that we don't work 7 out of 7 because our CVs will not get better, because if we don't do it, who will? But if we see science more as a teamwork and not use individual faces to put all the successes or failures on, we might share in the success and the failures.
Yes, I would definitely agree with that, because especially in astrophysics, everything now is becoming a teamwork, because it is really, sometimes facilities are huge or there is so much work to do that you have to split. And then definitely, I think this is also one of the findings, I think, from this UK research that I quoted, that what they found is that what could help. They asked also employees what would help them. And one was exactly that there would be more encouragement that they do teamwork, because then it is also easier if somebody gets sick. So it's also to encourage people to take sick leaves, not to be at work when they're ill, to take holiday, annual leave, to get rested, right? I think what would help, they said also, is that they would feel appreciated. Because now the problem is that we often feel that we are just not successful enough, because we work, but it's still more and more work is coming in, and we have this, we get the message, it's still not enough, right? So that would help. And then what was for me interesting also is, but not unexpected, is that they found that when they asked what would really help you, it's not like they need more like courses on time management or risk management. They need the problem to be solved at the source, you know, so to have less work, to feel appreciated, to have teamwork, that would help. Yeah.
Okay, any other question?
Yeah, thank you very much. Great talk. I was just trying to make sense of these two talks in combination. I was wondering, to what degree is that a gender issue, and where in your perspective is this a generational issue? So at my university, Gothenburg University, we're recently discussing what of that is actually just academia and the passion that just drives people to actually work as much, because many people also really enjoy what they're doing, and therefore they actually don't stop, although they perhaps should, and sometimes I would say, at least in my case, even could stop working. So is that something that we just need to more awareness about, and we're discussing that now, and particularly in younger generations, and therefore this is something that we could kind of take care of? Or how would you kind of streamline? You just said work less, do less. Is that something we can curb if it's a genuine passion? I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's. I would say first it's a generational issue. I think it's generational that we are talking more about this, because young generations are starting to discuss this, which I think is great. But I wouldn't say that it is just a problem that the younger generation feel that it is on a lower part of the hierarchical ladder. It's also on the top. Don't kid yourself. The higher you get, it can get even more complicated. You have more responsibilities. I know many people who are men and women, because at our university we have approximately half-half also in the leadership positions. So it's I see both genders higher up that they are stressed. They work so much because they have all this responsibility on their shoulders for the group, for the faculty, so on. So I think how we can change this, I think it cannot be changed by one institution, by one group of people. I think it has to be a change which goes through the whole system, because it doesn't help if in Slovenia we decide we are going to work less and publish less, because if we have to compete with for EU projects where they are counting papers, then that's not helpful. But this is why I'm hopeful that this new agreement on the reform of the research assessment, if it is for the whole Europe, then this could make a difference in the longer run, not tomorrow, but hopefully soon.
Thank you very much for your talk. As I was researching artistic work, where it's also a huge problem, you know, that life became work and basically life is only work. I was also, I mean, I don't have a question, I have more of a comment that, you know, as you already pointed, that like the whole evaluation process should change. So scientific results that are not only assessed in terms of, you know, for the science, but also for the society, kind of, you know, that also outreach, that the dissemination would kind of go more into the outreach. And I think that it's also very kind of problematic the way the scientific work has been imagined in a way of something that is, you know, only for a very selected group of people that has kind of a special special forces, you know, to kind of detect other things. It's a bit like with the construction of artistic work, which also does not count as work. So I guess that, you know, with a lot of this intellectual work, which is obviously also artistic work, that we need kind of a rethinking and again launching it as work and not something else. You know, something other than work, especially as a lot of areas which you already also commented on are not regarded as scientific work, even though they make sometimes even more than a half of our labor that we need to perform. You know, so I would very much strongly support you in your thesis, what we need.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you. I think it's exactly that it's not, if it was just that we would work for 12 hours on what we like, our research, what it writes, that would be great. I don't think that we will be complaining, but it is more that the higher you go, less time you have to do what brought you into research in academia, and more time you just spend on things that are really not bringing you a lot of joy, I would say.
Okay, I'm not sure if this question is very relevant, but what do you think of the recent development in Twitter with Elon Musk taking over and firing a lot of employees that didn't agree to work like 80, 90 hours a week? I mean, is this a blip, or do you think it's going to have ripple effect with more bosses insisting that people work extremely long hours?
Well, I cannot comment on Twitter. I'm not following this story very closely, but I can say that definitely it's not academia, it's not the only environment in which we work crazy hours nowadays. I think this is becoming more and more common also in other areas, which is of course not a good thing.
I was just curious, so I have a colleague who is employed in Norway at the University of Tromsø, and she is in her early 30s, and she recently took the position of head of department. And we discussed this a lot because in Slovenia, for many reasons, it's not necessarily, you know, the most obvious step. But what transpired was that at that university, they have a two-track kind of career system, and there are many more functions which deserve a salary, whereas in systems like the Slovenian system, there are very few functionaries in academia that receive a full salary for their administrative and managerial roles. At the same time, of course, for a researcher to decide to follow this admin/managerial track might be, you know, a very difficult decision to make. So I was wondering whether you could maybe reflect on whether the system might have potential, or whether we need a different solution altogether.
You mean like a Slovenian system?
No, like the system which distinguishes and which basically allows you to get a salary solely from managerial roles in academia.
Yeah, I guess this sounds like a good idea. So for my perspective, but I'm not really I'm not active in research in this area, so I cannot really have a very qualified opinion. In my first feeling would be that this would be good, because many times academics, when they get in such a position, then they need 2 years to get to understand everything that is going on, all types of projects, all the relations and so on, and then usually either they leave after 3 or 4 years, they go back to research, or they decide to stay another mandate, but then it's probably already too late to go back to research after such a long time away. So maybe it would be good to have people who are taking this track, but they would still need, it cannot be just some kind of manager, but they still need to understand the specifics of academic environment and work. Yeah.
Any other question, perhaps? I think we...
Thank you. It's more a comment also than a question. I'm Tanya, I'm working at the VUB, and I'm an administrative staff, so I'm not in academia as such. And I'm coming from industries. So I've worked many years in different industries, small and big companies, and also in public bodies. And I'm also involved in a small association called Belgian Women in Science, who wants to get equality for women and men in academic careers. And I've been struggling since I've started at the VB to understand what's the main difference between what's happening in academic sectors and in the industry. And at this stage, but I'm still not sure, and I think it refers to what was said earlier in one of the talks. One of the differences is in academia, it is one system, and it is so international and so connected that everything that both of you have explained is happening everywhere. While in industry, if you don't like the culture that is imposed, for example, by Elon Musk, you can change and you can find another job that will be as interesting and that will be as fulfilling, but with different conditions. So at this stage, this is my preliminary conclusion, but I think this is a major difference. So that's why I also agree with the fact that the system should change as a whole, not make small adjustments.
Thank you. It's a good point, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for this nice insight. Is there any other comment or question? No? If not, I think we should make a short stop, and we should continue at... So we'll have 15-minute break, so 16:55 we will proceed with the roundtable. Okay? So please don't miss this up.
work-life balance is maintained today. Let's. So how? Yeah.
What a coincidence. It's true. It's normal. Yeah. Today in the morning I was in another event and it was CEOs talking about energy efficiency, energy crisis. It's exactly the opposite. It's one thing.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
I kind of did. But it was like, it was really, really obvious. It was like, technology how to work.
Okay, everyone, welcome back. Thank you for staying for the second part of today's mini YLA symposium on work-life balance and its sustainability in academia. So this is a round table which we've conceptualized in a semi-scripted way. So there are some questions that Anna and I, who are moderating the talk, have prepared for our speakers. But in case anybody in the audience ever feels inspired to pose a question, please do, feel free to intervene. So this roundtable is intended to to lean on the two talks that you'd heard just before break by Andrea and Jovana, in order to kind of ground some of these more general insights and concepts and hypotheses in people's, experience in academia. We're very lucky to have with us today people representing very different disciplines and also different universities. So here's Suhao, he's a chemist, he's based in Paris at Cergy University. We have Birgit who's based in Brussels and who is a literature and intermedia studies scholar. We have Leila with a legal and economics background who's based in Barcelona. We have Andrea and Jovana, whom you've already met. And Anna and I, who are the moderators of today's roundtable, are based in Ljubljana. So in order to kind of bring all of these different experiences, institutional, cultural, personal experiences together in this gesture of collective action, trying to investigate how work-life balance is never just about our own individual and personal time management skills, nor is it about the efficacy of HR strategies, but it's actually, at the nexus of different structural factors that basically shape our lives and also our experience and assessments of our lives. I would like to start with a fairly broad and general opening question. Namely, I'd like to ask our speakers to reflect on the first time you'd ever encountered this question of work-life balance in relation to your own career or life experience. What prompted you to think about it, and in what way? What does work-life balance mean to you, and has your idea of it maybe shifted over your years in academia, or over your career development, basically? I'll pass the mic around, maybe if that's okay. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So I think for me, the first time would be immediately after my PhD degree, at the time when I need to decide where to go, because that time I really want to meet my parents' reunion. Okay, so I have several different choices in the UK, in the States, and also Australia. But finally, I got the offer firstly in Sweden. So it's very fast, and then I talked with my parents, and then I moved to Sweden for my postdoc research. So that is the time for me, it was a struggling time to decide whether I should, where I should go. Okay, that's the only issue. But after that, I think everything is okay. Yeah.
Oh, hello. I think for me it was especially also during the postdoc when I didn't have the position that I now have, so now I'm an assistant professor. But as a postdoc I was working a lot, now I'm still working a lot, but I have more sort of perspective. Back then it was really sort of, sort of drowning, publishing or perishing was very, very real. It still is, but it's a bit more sort of in time, or sort of, you have a longer trajectory or sort of horizon. I was teaching, I was preparing an ERC grant. I think that was going to be my golden ticket to that job, so a lot depended on it. I didn't get the grant in the end. I did submit an application, but that was a really, really tough process where I was working non-stop, I would say, during weekends, in evenings, nights. I had mini breakdowns as well. Looking back on it, I don't think I realized it at the time because I was going for the deadline. But it was a very unhealthy situation to be in. So I'm glad I did put in the proposal, but I'm thinking never again, or not in this way. Not that I would never sort of go for a big grant again, but I need to be able to plan it better, to get oxygen in my brain, to take some distance to return to it, etc., etc. So the work-life balance, I think, would be essential in order to do a better job at what I actually wanted to achieve.
I don't know where to start, actually. Well, at the beginning, the first time that I realized that academia has some structural issues was when I had my little girl. So at the time, I was on part-time contract, just on teaching contract. I was finishing my PhD. And I found myself in a situation where she chose a date that was very unfortunate to get born, because she was born basically at the beginning of new trimester, which means if you're on a part-time contract or you're on a teaching contract, if I'm not teaching, I don't have social security. So what happened to me is I had to go teach 1 week after she was born, or I wouldn't have any money. I don't think I'm the only one that happened to her, but it was very brutal. It was very unexpected. It was specifically because it's the first child, you're so stupidly fast to say, okay, I'm gonna do that, I'm going back. But looking back, that was completely crazy because things might have gone super bad. Thank God they went good for me and for her. But that was, I think, the starting point when I started realizing that the game we are playing in academia is a very dangerous one. In terms of not just general work-life balance, but in terms of structures, cultural structures, family, etc. So admittedly, everything at the same time happened to me because I was an expat in Barcelona, because originally I'm from Slovenia. But frankly, only looking back, I understand how deeply rooted the challenges and issues in academia are regarding many things, and precarity is one of them.
I think I first started really seriously thinking about that when I was doing my PhD. So I had a child, my daughter, and I had a generous 12-month maternal leave, but still when I returned to work, I had 15 months left to finish my PhD. I had full teaching load, and my daughter was enrolled in kindergarten, but she spent more time at home because she was sick all the time, which is typical. So I had to juggle. My mentor didn't have any understanding for these issues, so he was expecting me to finish, to do all the teaching, and I juggled all these commitments. For example, when I stayed, when I had to go teaching, my partner stayed at home to take care of the daughter, and so we did that for many years afterwards like that. So I never missed teaching duties, but of course my research work suffered. So this was very stressful period to catch the deadline and everything. And then I distinctly remember another period which was very stressful about 8 years ago. I had more than full teaching load. I had 2 PhD students, international collaborations, and I was leading a European Space Agency project. So I was literally for half a year, I think I just went I couldn't fall asleep in the evening because I was so stressed. Then I would wake up at 4 a.m., couldn't fall asleep back, you know, this cycle that you go. So then when I talked, I was at the edge of the burnout. And when I talked to my superiors, they said, well, what can we do? Try to do it. And then when the next year, they wanted to repeat the same story, to give me again this full, over full teaching load, and then I really fought back because it was really not, it was really bad for my health.
Honestly, from the beginning of my scholar career, it has been challenging because I was foolish enough to have first child and then start my PhD. So she was 1 and went to kindergarten when I started my PhD. Basically, there were several phases, like you described, which were awfully challenging. So when she was going through these childhood illnesses, I was supposed to do research and write PhD and so on. When I was at height of finishing my PhD, she was 4.5, 5. And now that she's 14, she tells me what kind of psychological consequences it left on her, seeing me being completely exhausted, sitting in a corner of the room with headphones, being physically there but mentally absent. And then the period after when I was doing a postdoc and was trying to commute internationally. This is also something that another colleague of mine who just got ERC, she was trying to do that. And actually I know several examples, and it is, I think, one of the most dire prices you can pay in academia in Europe, where this commuting thing seems to be doable, but it's actually not, even when it's physically doable. I think the consequences, emotional, are huge. For the past 7, then very hard period was this after postdoc, trying to attain stable position, which meant circus of constant project application, very much in line with what you said. And honestly, I came to the point of being like on regular 2 times a year burnout, almost burnout period. And I'm not sure I came out of it. But what I know now is that I needed to start changing also my attitude, not just vice versus work, but also like I went to my union representative and I confronted my head of department with a potential legal, suit, because the system is basically exploiting your passion and your dire economic position. When you have a child, when you are a migrant like I am, you really have no much choice but work your ass off because you cannot survive, and you usually don't have other like industry opportunities, unfortunately, when you are in humanities. So, and also now the satisfaction I'm getting now is from like being a bit in a here and there in some position of power, and then trying to change the game. And like speaking about it, like I don't want to work on weekend, I don't want to work in the evening, and accepting that I'm going to be or look to other people less professional.
So thanks very much for sharing. And by the way, we agreed with Natalia, if someone from the audience would like to ask something to our speakers, just raise your hand and we are going to pass the mic to you. So it's nice that you mentioned the HR and the union Because our next question was regarding the institutions. So we are from different parts of Europe, different universities, and this awareness at the institution can differ also regarding these issues. So are there any instruments in place in your universities to deal with mental health, to support employees, maybe workshops organized regarding like work balance? And if this is the case, were these instruments helpful to you? We can start from this side now.
I actually did my homework and prepared. So work-life balance is one of the mechanisms that are expected to be included into gender equality plans. And gender equality plans are, as of last year, requirement for all institutions who want to apply for Horizon Europe funding. They need to have it. So there is a big push towards or requirement from academic institutions to put these kind of mechanisms in place. So my research team and we analyzed the work-life balance mechanisms that were accepted in 21 gender equality plans in Slovenia. And it's interesting what you find is that majority of mechanisms are flexible working hours, remote work from home, and flexibility allowing changes in the way work is organized. So it's not less work, it's just take more work home, or or making it more easy and legitimate to work from home. But as I said in my presentation, this is, I think, double-edged sword. On one hand, it has its good sides, like you can, for instance, stay with your child who is semi-ill, but when your toddler is sick, there is no working from home, and expecting something like this from people is actually like a double burden. And only few mechanisms are actually really tackling, I think, the issues that people are really feeling as an invasion of their private life. Like limiting, 2 institutions chose to limit email hours and meeting hours, so you cannot get email in the evening or schedule meeting to be organized in the afternoon. Then there is this childcare facilities that are helping people during summer, because this is a problem. You have a kindergarten till the age of 6, but you cannot leave 7, 8, 9-year-old child for 8 hours at home alone. They will like burn your house. Yeah, and burn their brain down with watching stupid stuff. So there are like summer activities and so on. I think this can be very helpful. But what you said in your question, whether there are mental health support, for now, I did not see it anywhere. And in my research center, we have institute that is specialized for mental health at work. And they organized one lecture once. But for instance, psychotherapy, the only thing that honestly helped me in finding this like distance to my work is something I had to pay on my own, and it was very expensive, and I could afford it only in later stages of my career. So not really when I was out of job and when I needed it. So a bit of reflection.
Yes, so the question was whether we have some, I don't think so. So we are a small university and we don't have a big HR department, so we don't have anything in place for now, but I'm sure that if I came and suggested that we have some workshops, or they would be happy to say, oh yes, please organize it. So Yeah, I'm not sure how it is at different universities in Slovenia, but we are just at the beginning also with this equality plan, and hopefully we will get there. But I think in a way, I don't expect that our institution will have a special department for mental health, but they could support perhaps, yes, getting this from medical professionals. Yeah, thank you.
I'm going to be brief. I'm not going to be very long on this. We have official plans and strategies regarding gender equality, inclusion, etc. For quite some time at the UPF, Pompeu Fabra University in Spain has been very active in projects with the European Commission. People, yes, they are innovative, but the reason why we were active is because there's absolutely no funding in Spain. But when I say no funding, it is very brutal how you need to get the funding in with competitive projects. And for us, while for majority of Europe, it's a relatively new thing that it's starting to be competitive. For us, it's a modus operandi from since I can remember. So that's why I also stayed at the university with Marie Curie, because that was the only option. The plans on paper are good. The will behind the plans is also good. It is not really just something that's written. They really believe that they want to do that. But then the reality strikes. The underfunding plays a big role with us. It really plays a big role with us. People in general inside of the departments, so I'm working with the law faculty, I'm working with the faculty of economics, and I'm at the business school at the UPF. So I've seen 3 different sides of it. Not enough people, not enough money, way too big of a workload. And all of these expectations, as much as we want to help, and they're trying to be helpful, our working hours are still insane. So I promised myself I'm going to mention this one, and it fits perfectly here. So there was a joke, internal joke between a Slovene friend of mine, actually, and me, not so long ago, on one of the social networks, when she tagged me in a meme that says, I love my flexible working hours in academia. I can choose my 18 hours that I'm going to work per day. So, no, but it's true. It's actually true. So that's what we're dealing with. So it ties back to exactly what you said. Beautiful flexibility. Beautiful also that you allow me to stay at home with my kid. But look at the example of pandemics. I was in middle of Marie Curie, and Marie Curie individual fellowship is a thing that takes all of your life. I got locked in the middle of my Marie Curie with a 3-year-old in a flat for 4 months in Spain. I asked for PhD help with some basic research because I can't breathe, because I'm alone with the kid. And the answer was, they're overburdened as it is. So equality on paper is super nice. In reality, it just doesn't function, and the rules didn't support it. Did anybody say you can finish your Marie Curie later? Frankly, no. Not until I already kind of did it, and then they say, maybe we can prolong it because this was really bad. Doesn't help. So reality a bit different than paper, but yes, the will is there, it just doesn't pan out.
So as to workshops being organised at VUB, or sort of what is happening, there are workshops at VUB on mental health, on well-being. We had a survey at our faculty also on well-being and how things are going. So there is certainly attention for it. I think workshops are great and good, but at the same time, it doesn't stop there, right? So it puts things on the agenda, but it can't be the excuse for an organization to say, well, we've organized a workshop. You should be able to do it by now, or it should be better, or the problem has gone away. I don't think this is the case at VUB. It does go further. So, for example, what really helps, I think, is if you do want to go for a big grant, that you can get some kind of reduction in your teaching load, right? To be able to devote your time to that, or part of your time to that, so that it doesn't end up being academic work only on weekends and in evenings because you're constantly firefighting, having meetings, doing your teaching. So I think that's really helpful. The same thing for YLA fellows at VUB. We do get a small portion of our teaching load reduced for being able to come here. I think that's tremendously helpful and very much appreciated as well. So it's good to mention that one more time, so that hopefully this will also be continued, of course. But then, I mean, I think that's also sort of the level of sort of workshops and the institution. What also needs to change is, I think, the culture of how you then implement these things, or the tips and the tricks, the workshops that you're getting. If everybody is expecting you to reply within 5 seconds or 5 minutes, or you just start to have internalized that feeling. It might never have been spoken out loud, but you think that that's the case. Well, then, of course, you don't sort of end up with a better work-life balance, or you use the grant that you got for your writing time on answering emails because they will come anyway, right? And I don't really have a solution for that. It's a combination of self-discipline, of expectations, of talking about this, of making kind of, statements as to I'm not available then, or I'm working then, and being accepted. Or people also encouraging you to say, well, no, you were going for that grant. No, you don't have to be at this meeting, so that you can also support each other in that. That's how far I've gotten in my reflection on that, but I think there's still more work to be done there, so that we get the best out of everyone, but don't, do that at whatever price or cost.
In our university, I think there should be a work-life balance, but I have never contact with such an organization. But the thing is, and there are also some regular rules in the institute that help you balance your life and work. For example, if you want to work after 6 p.m., you need a special approval from the department. So, and if you want to work in the weekend, you also need approval. Yeah. So in this case, I think it's quite balanced. Yeah, unless you want to work more. So for the research excellence, I did get a lot of support from the. I got a funding from the CY Initiative Excellence, so they supported me to purchase equipment, to recruit postdoc, and also supported me for a medium-term travel, research travel. For example, I stayed 1 month from October to November in Cambridge, and they support a lot. And also we have the HR department, which help you for the financial issue. Like, they're working perfectly. Okay, so help you, especially the EUTOPIA team. Like we had Kate, Kate and Sylvie, August, and Achno. Their team is excellent. And also, I got support from other HR. For example, if you wanted to handle with your tax issue, there was a funny Patrick. You can always, you can knock door and come in. She's very helpful. So all these things I think is very helpful for work-life balance. Yeah.
This is a good call for asking if there are any immediate reactions from our audience.
So you can just clarify. Yeah. Just clarify. You need approval if you want to work after 6 or on a weekend? Yeah. How do they track that you're not working? Like, yeah. So you're locked out.
So there we have a lab manager or the technician. He closed the door at 6 p.m. So for example, we are doing chemistry, we are doing polymerization, which might take 24 hours for one reaction. So then my postdoc every time come to me, ask for my help for special approval. Then we go to the department, and we also get equipment which help keep you safe. So it's equipment. Okay, if you lie down, and this can make the alarm. Yeah, so like that.
So but it's not that they're taking your laptop or something?
Oh, no. You can still work in your office.
I'm going to tell you something. I figured that one out when they told me in the consulting company that I'm working. Well, I'm working as a consultant for my IT company right now for sustainability reporting. And when I had my onboarding, with my manager, I thought I was going to freak out and die from happiness when he said, listen to me. There's no email answering at night. I might be crazy enough to have to send you something because my day was crazy. I don't want to see your answer. And
I don't want you to check that email until your clock starts in the morning. If you really need to call a customer in the afternoon, you will go through the process of asking me and then asking the country manager and then asking your sustainability manager if you can do that, but you are prohibited from having extra hours because we are protecting you from our customers trying to take all of it from you. And when I heard that, I thought I died and went to heaven, and I'm so much enjoying that policy that I can't tell you, because I closed down my laptop at 12 and I'm done, because I work part-time. So I'm there from 8 to 12, even if the house is on fire, I swear guys, I don't care. Until next day at 8 in the morning when I try to put down the fire. It's wonderful, it's just not a practice in academia, frankly.
Wow, thank you everyone for being so cooperative.
There was one more. Okay.
Well, thanks for opening this Pandora's box of how rhetoric and...
Subhash wants to say.
Does that fit into your research finding that the man seems to have had good experience, whereas the women have like more challenge?
I noticed too when we started. I really did.
Honestly, I don't think it's fair to put somebody on a spot, but and maybe it's also an age issue and so on, but yeah, generally it is a tendency that women somehow have more issues than men, even though, of course, both men and women produce children or have parents or have sick family members and people to care about. So of course I don't want to put a colleague on a burden, but on a spot, but it is yeah.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't think it's fair to like judge on one.
No, in general, I would. Sorry, need to change. In general, I would say that it is there are double standards. There are many of them. One of them is that a woman should not say no to some work that is expected from her. So that's why in academia, women often do things which are good for the community, for the group. They spend lots of time on that, but then in the end, people just ask, how many papers have you produced? And if they say no, it is treated like it is like, wow, that's really, yeah, this is really bad. She said no to this. But when a man says no to such commitments, they just say, oh, yeah, that's okay, because he's focusing on his career and research work. While for a woman, it is like a bad thing. She's not a team player and so on.
On that note, I have to add, there is something that is called emotional labor, and since Andreas had the statistics and are showing that there is a higher level of depression, mental health issues, challenges in academia, and people, it means that very often, for instance, PhD students, each one of them at some point falls into semi-depression, needs a support, a shoulder to cry on, somebody to guide them, to give a good advice. Very often this emotional labor is sought from female colleagues, because they are labeled with having more nurturing skills, more compassion, understanding, or they are just patient enough to spend their coffee break, you know, so because they are also socialized to respond and not to deflect this kind of approaches. And this is also something that is this invisible labor, in addition to being a good team player and doing something for the community. And I'm sure the list is even longer.
Yeah, I also have a question about family friendliness of your universities. And it's a minor issue, but I will give you the example. So my question would be, how does your universe support you or not if you ask that if your family can go on a trip with you? So for example, if somebody from Brussels arriving to Ljubljana for a week would like to bring its family with him, it's understandable that you have to pay for the family, but how does the administrative work then works? For example, I had a very bad issue this year. So I wanted to go to Lela, to Barcelona, and we have this system of public procurements, of buying flights, etc. And my faculty basically told me, well, you know what, we won't give a public procurement question out also for your family. So we'll buy you a ticket and then try to find a similar ticket also for your family, and that's it, we won't help you, which I found like ridiculous. And then I basically said, well, then I just won't go, because I don't need to go to Lela, we'll have a Zoom. So that's why I'm asking, it is an issue, especially in Slovenia, where you have to move to a foreign country for 3 months. So the question would be, how does your university support this family friendliness of going your family with you on conferences, for example?
If I may start, because I have to do that all the time. As I was speaking with the underfunding and how supportive they are and they're trying to put it in practice, here I have not one word bad to say about my university, because they knew about my situation from the beginning. I also have a very international profile, so I travel more sometimes than I would like to. But especially with sustainability and corporations right now, it's a circus out there, so I'm everywhere. And my little girl has to go with me. What helps me to break the barrier, aside from them being understanding, is the fact that you cannot buy a separate ticket for a 5-year-old. So I had my share of battles regarding that, and every single time my credit card was paying for her. But I had instances where that was not a problem, because in our system you have to go through an official travel agency, and you have to book it through there and stuff. So I had a little bit of issues of trying to explain I really should not fly at 5 in the morning because I can't get the kid out of the bed. So if we can do something around 7, that was okay. But after, we got a very nice system of me just saying to the agency, this is my credit card number, so please, for the little girl. But I think it was exceptional in the sense that this is real inclusion and diversity. There is no way in this earth that I can buy her a ticket away from me. So in that sense, I'm just advocating for what is happening to me, and I believe that because of my situation is so different and I can't purchase it aside, that they were very accommodating. But I suspect that it would be a different thing if it would be me and then my family on the side, the whole family, and somebody else could take on his name, my daughter. I believe I would have way more trouble if that would be the case, but they were very accommodating in the sense of that they knew that there was no plan B. So I have a good experience, but there's a reason why. So just from that side.
Thank you. I have just a suggestion for Utopia. For the next Utopia weeks, for example, is just to have a kindergarten and paid facilities for people who want to come with their children. Because it's nice to hear the complaints, but maybe we can do something about it at our level.
I just want to comment something on this, so there's not going to hear, like, there is a lot of, where to start? There's a lot of discussion on, we are doing public work, and me, the first in line, I'm always aware that I'm being paid by public money, and that I'm serving to the public, and that I'm serving to the students, and that I'm creating something beyond a product that is a test in front of me, okay? And I respect the public funds. But there is always a comment on suggestions like this. They're getting extra services for our money. But I want to stop here because we never push back, and this is my chance of pushing back and saying, yes, but I'm there every Saturday. I'm there every Sunday. I answer to every personal student's email because he cannot do something next morning, and I encourage him that it's okay. So we do our extra, and not little. So I would appreciate also if those comments that are negative from us asking things that should be normal in terms of inclusion, because we do travel a lot and we do travel for public benefit. Not every travel I really much like, because I see a room and an airplane, and that's that. But it would be nice that we would see that we can actually make our family healthier too with providing a service like that, because many times the trips that we do don't serve us really well in personal times, and our families are suffering too. But we never put it like that. We just take that negative comment of the public funds are being misused, and we shy away. It's not true. The public funds are being very well used, but maybe we should take better care of people who are providing those services.
So kindergartens at conferences have been actually invented in Yugoslavia in the 80s at sociological conferences. It was initiative of so-called Yugoslav neo-feminists. However, this practice that lasted for a few years was stopped somewhere in the 90s because the child care became more professionalized, and you needed to fulfill certain requirements, criteria. You cannot just leave child with somebody, but it needs to be a professional person if it's a public institution, and so on. So it's interesting to see how, I'm sure that it's doable, but what I want to say is that it's also nice to see whose burden is it. Regarding whether our institutions are giving this, supporting this, that you take your child with yourself. For instance, at my institution, it's much easier to organize. So yeah, it needs to be public procurement, but what you can agree with is that it's procured for 2 persons, you and your child, and then one expense is on you and the other is on the institution. Honestly, the problem is not procuring, it's the money. I mean, it's expensive. For me, on few occasions, I had a plan I wanted, and then I realized that simply the airplane ticket is too expensive. It's not really affordable for my mid-level academic salary. So I think a lot of this, we are not talking much about it today, but a lot of these issues are class issues. I mean, at certain problems you can easily throw money at and solve them, and not everybody have this additional money. So at our research center there is idea, like one mechanism is to provide for people who get like scholarship to go abroad, and if they have some additional family expenses, that they can apply within the institution for additional funding, for instance, for school or childcare or whatever, like renting a bigger apartment or something like that. However, it's like one person in a institution of 300 individuals, and I'm not sure to what extent it's just started, so we shall see. But yeah.
Also shift the lens a little bit and also ask you more directly what kind of hacks or solutions you devise, because we all do. I mean, well, I've only started thinking about this recently due to a burnout, but we all do try to come up with a way to sustain, our careers in academia.
To sustain our career, we're all trying to devise strategies of sustaining our careers in academia, partly due to the passion project that it is. So yeah, any strategies would be welcome to open up.
Okay, thank you. I think work-life balance is a very general question. So it's not only limited to like our level, young leaders. I think it exists in almost every level in your career. So because we are living in a challenging and also sometimes very competitive environment, right? You need to get your funding and to publish nice papers and get promoted in your position. So I think this is a question in ancient China, okay, people emphasize inner peace and purity. So I think it's a very nice solution, at least to me, to find the balance. Because the line between ambitious and greedy sometimes is not very clear, right? So you publish a good journal, you want to publish another one, right? You get a funding, you want to get more. So how to balance this? So myself with my family, we are doing meditation. Okay, so we follow the truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance. So when there, for example, some conflict happened, so it's normal, right? But then I go back to meditation and look inside. I look inside what's so life become easier. I only try to refine myself and to be a better one, to see, am I doing this for good purpose or for selfish reasons, right? So this is very helpful. So that's help me balance life and work, and so I can always live and work with appreciation to the environment, to the people around me. So yeah, this is my suggestion.
Oh, that sounds like a very effective strategy. I'm pretty bad, to be honest, at sort of doing exactly that. But things that I do, and that's maybe a bit similar, is also sort of, reflection on where you want to go, sort of the goals, how to achieve them, seeing how everything fits, what I need to do to get there. That's, of course, still very much work and not so much work-life balance, although it's a holistic approach, I think, as you were saying as well, as to how you then sort of fit that in. And then very concrete things. I don't take a lot of holidays, but when I do, I'm prohibited by my partner to bring any work with me. And you see how I need to phrase this, right? Because if I would not have someone with me, I would probably still have my laptop, etc. But it's a very healthy thing to sort of disconnect completely. And to also signal that. I think that I'm becoming increasingly aware of also what kind of message I'm sending to my students, to my PhD students, by being available all the time, or by replying, or sort of not that I'm having the expectation that they respond, but implicitly I am sending the message like, I'm still here, I'm still working. So I do see that that has an effect on them, on how they perceive it, even if I don't intend it that way. So I'm doing my best to become increasingly aware of my role within the organization, of what I'm implicitly and explicitly saying or sort of sending out. Also being aware that in order to do a good job, I need to take care of myself and of my family. So that's also sort of, it's a bit of a learning process. I talked about this with other colleagues as well. I don't think the equilibrium will ever be achieved, but it's sort of trying to do better and accepting that you are sort of balancing all the time as a sort of kind of verb. So that ideal position is also something that you probably will never achieve or sort of can sustain for very long. But what you can do is sort of little things, being reflective, and tomorrow's another day, so you can try and do better again, and sort of trying to let go. But I'm struggling with it as well. So
I don't think I'm the good person to give any advice regarding work-life balance. What I did notice with myself is that somehow with the birth of my child, I started understanding where my patterns were of saying yes all the time, and being this helpful person even when it was to the detriment of me. So what changed the game is that all of a sudden 2 very important things in my life got my attention, and I kind of always knew which one is the more important one. I learned to say no, and that helps a lot. But I learned to say no without guilty conscience. And I have learned to say I am not available without feeling one slight bit guilty. I think I brought myself to there just with overworking so much. So I put myself in a position when I felt I couldn't anymore, which is very far. And when I got myself there, I said, well, I'm not going there anymore because I don't want to. Not even I can't, because usually that was the reason I can't. Now the reason is I don't want to. And now I say no, and I'm not afraid of the backlash, because there is quite some, because once again, I work in corporate law, and I work in business. So no is not something that they really like to hear, specifically for a female. But I do it well in the sense that I really don't feel guilty. And I resolve the thing when the thing needs to be resolved. The schedule is as it is. It has as much hours. I believe that what I'm doing is in the most efficient manner that I can. I'm being fast, I'm being proactive, I take decisions. So since I feel comfortable with the way I'm doing things, I don't feel guilty for saying this is too much. And it started working for me, finally. So that would be my advice.
Yes, I think for me it is very similar like that. So I'm also not the right person to give advice on that. And I also got myself by overworking to the point where I just couldn't look at the computer screen anymore. It just like, yeah, it was just like, no, I can really not do this anymore. And I really, they are just asking too much of me, and I should not feel guilty about that. So it's just, yeah, exactly. So I'm trying, I'm learning to say no. I sometimes do, and I don't feel guilty, but often I still say yes when I should have said no. Yeah, I think for me the biggest burden are emails, so they keep coming, and
it's not the emails, the request behind.
Yeah, all the work that's, yeah. So I think about 10 years ago I was still on top of it. I could reply all emails. Now it's just I'm now way. So I do try to keep track of all the urgent emails, the important emails. I mark them, and then sometimes
even those come down.
They sink down and I forget. So I don't, it's not that I intentionally would not reply to emails, but I think it's, I don't feel that guilty as I used to, because I see this happening also to other of my colleagues in other countries. So it's just, it's the way it is, and I think people understand that. But yeah, I think it also helps when you, if I spend time with my children, if I go somewhere with them, then I still feel the urge to check my emails on my mobile, but I try to keep this to minimum. So yeah, I think it is very good if you can do it, that you just turn off your emails and computer at 4 p.m., 6 p.m., whatever, and not check emails just before you go to bed, for example, or the first thing in the morning when you wake up. Because I know that some people, I also talked with some colleagues a few weeks ago, and they said sometimes in the morning I check my emails before I go to work, and then I end up not going to work because I work all the time at home, and then I just save the time that I would commute to work and back. Yeah, so it's really not healthy.
Yeah, I agree with all the hacks that people said before me. I would just add few of my own, but they are not most important. Like putting boundaries around your private time, and sometimes very physical ones. So, for instance, I schedule my private time in advance in such a way that, for instance, I buy tickets for a rock concert, which are too expensive for me to forget. Or I promise a friend that I'm going to, help her organize a party or a gathering, and it's simply an obligation I cannot take myself out of. But in this way, I force myself to spend time with people, to go out. I schedule my sport activities, not in a way like what would be most efficient, but what commits me most. So, for instance, I agree with a group of colleagues to go to do this fitness together, and I feel like I have to be there at that time, and in this way I kick myself to really do it, because when it was depending on me having free time, it would never happen. In Ljubljana, as you maybe noticed, there is not enough sun during winter time. So, and I'm coming from a more sunnier part of Europe. So I also made this decision with myself. When the sun is outside, no matter how much time I have, I need to go for a 1 hour walk on sun, because I don't know, my vitamin D, whatever, But I make these kind of rules that help me, because it's, when I was trying, to say, when I finish, then it never happened. Also, I schedule time with my daughter, with my husband. I schedule time when I want to dance. Dancing is very important. Physical activity. I'm not hacking it all, but it's. I think this kind of boundaries help. But I have to admit, all of this was much more attainable for me once I got stable job.
Thanks a lot for. Okay, there is a question from the audience. I can.
Thank you. Everything you've just said really paints a picture of a place and a time and upbringing, a generation. And I was wondering, you've all been talking about how you have to have learned to say no, to put up boundaries between your work and your life. So I was wondering if you've noticed something different in your younger colleagues. Have they have an easier time saying yes, or is it something that is still prevalent? And should we be teaching younger academics that they have a right to limit their workload, to have time for themselves and what they want to do outside of their academia, of their academic work?
I'm going to give you the experience from the 3 institutions I'm working at. Well, 3, actually 4, even a second Paris. It's not that the elderly don't want to give that chance to the newcomers, or that the newcomers are not a different generation. The workload, let's start back with that, in academia is absolute madness. It is madness. It is teaching, it is writing, it is following up, it is administration, it is you name it, at different levels, on a different way or stage. It is completely insane, and that insanity goes from the top to the bottom. It's just the tasks are different, but they are numerous. So even if the younger generation would be more prone to saying no, they don't get much chance to, because that's the amount of work that that particular department has, and this is it. It's not like it's a mess of the youngers or it's the mess of the elders. We're all in the same mess, just a different level of a mess. So it's a systemic issue right now in academia, also regarding what was said before, how we are being promoted. And that's a comment that we had with a colleague here that's right now sitting in the audience. I said, nobody ever said that we should actually just stop with excellence just being seen in publications. Let's start marking and grading the fact that you have that many hours of teaching per year too. So if you want to be promoted and you want to do the habilitation, both of them count. And if they don't, one of them shouldn't be part of your job. So in that sense, but even if the generation is a bit different, they're still battling the same dragon. That's the problem.
I think I see in my PhD students and also some postdocs, they have an easier, they don't feel guilty saying no, and I don't feel like pressuring them into doing some things, but I can see, like it was said, if they are trying to stay in academia and to get new research projects or permanent positions, they will hit this wall whether I tell them that they have to do sometimes things that they don't want to or not. So it's a reality.
Okay. So thanks to all of you for sharing your personal hacks that help to maintain work-life balance. I would like to come back to the potential role of our employees, so universities and institutions. Related to what Sura mentioned before about the work-life balance, police in Paris, where you need permission to work after 6 and stuff like that. Because in academia we are in this, it seems we are in some kind of a paradox. So given the freedom of self-management, the freedom of flexibility, we tend to put too much work on our shoulders, like we are our own worst bosses. So do you think that
control or more control from the institutions over our working hours or emails and or things like that, paradoxically could help us to solve the life-work balance problem. What do you think?
Honestly, I think that we should stick to certain basic rules for the beginning. I think that there should be, it should become a part of culture that it's inappropriate to write emails or receive emails at certain time, and that it's inappropriate to organize conference on Saturday and Sunday. Which is a standard. For instance, now I'm for the first time PI of a Big Horizon project, so I'm at the table when we are sitting and scheduling these meetings. And I'm now in position to organize the next one. And I gave a doodle with Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So if people should travel from Monday to Friday, and I'm also fighting a battle within the consortium because people have to, negotiate teaching obligation and so on. And this is why the conference started to be organized during the weekend, so everybody can finish their teaching. But I think we should, it should become a part of what we consider like political correctness. Like it's inappropriate to comment somebody's body, figure, beauty, and so on. It's simply inappropriate. And I think this is something that should be aware, a matter of awareness, persistence, and especially sticking to this principle on part of those who are in power to influence something. And it needs to be collective. I think it's a first step, not a solution till the end, of course.
Yeah, I think there is a bit of a conflict between the flexibility of your working hours and then saying you cannot send emails after 6 p.m. because for some people that's the only time where they can work because they are taking care of the children before or whatever. So it's, I think I would leave this I don't know exactly how I would solve this. Maybe just not that emails, or you can write emails, but they are not actually sent by 7 a.m. next morning. So there is this. Okay, there are things like in astronomy, you have to work sometimes during the night. So I've lived for many years on some project where I got an SMS when a satellite detected something, and the telescope reacted immediately, robotic telescope, and I had to go at 4 a.m. to sit at the computer, and so it was not planned, it was whenever it could happen. So I don't know what institutions can do. Yeah, it can, they can promote this work-life, not work-life balance by not expecting people to work, definitely whenever I send an email to my PhD outside of normal working hours, I do not expect them to reply. I also don't expect them to reply even during working hours that they reply immediately. I also don't reply often immediately, and I think this is good because it taught me that if I do reply immediately, then I immediately get reply back, and then you just get more emails back if you. What institutions could do is, I think it cannot be. Things will not change if we don't change the rules. The promotion. What if we will still count number of publications, or then it's just people will work more because even if they will not send emails, but they will maybe write an article in the evening. So it's. I think it has to be a systemic change in how we evaluate research output.
Thank you. I would go straight on that, on the systemic change. I think limiting as to when you can work and when you can send emails, but this is a very brutal limitation. In any case, limiting would be a good signal as to how much work actually needs to be done with how many people in the institution, because after a month of that, everything would collapse.
Honestly, the whole department would just go down, that's that. And we would figure out that what we're doing with the amount of people we're doing is unsustainable. That would be a good signal. My personal situation is different, so I have to do that all the time at night. But I never send it at night unless it's a personal connection with a send now. So I reply, I organize everything, I strategize, I put it the way I need to put it, but it goes out at 8 in the morning, that's that. And every single time, if we're not friends and if we're not close, then I won't push the send button at midnight. The rest, sorry, I can't get it in the middle of the night because we know each other. But what I'm trying to say, if it's a really professional business relationship, it's 800, my students, 800. Unless it was something urgent and he's nervous that he's not going to get the 0 on the test, then okay, fine, he gets it then. But otherwise, it's respectful to the other people's time because I have a personal problem that I need to resolve like that. But limiting it, I think it would be an awesome signal as to how bad we're doing. No, how great we're actually doing with how bad the situation is.
Yes, so what institutions can do, I think I would also go for the sort of culture shift. Too often we tell these stories, or we hear these stories of I was still working late of night, or I had so many grants, and I have so many grants. And so you kind of normalize or idealize a particular way of working or a particular way of creating activity. And as we have seen in our training sessions, being active is not necessarily being effective. So I think that institutions too should take this into account. What is the most effective rather than the most active? We sometimes, and this is also something that we have discussed amongst young leaders, we create work for ourselves, right? Or by feeling the need to reply to emails, or by organizing another thing, or going to this or going to that. Sometimes we just need to clearly see, well, what are the priorities? And obviously a lot of work needs to be done, but we need to think about what really needs to be done. Not just what is urgent, but what is really important. All too often we are focusing on the urgent, I think. Me too, because it's urgent all the time. But why is it urgent all the time? And this is often a trickle-down effect, because things are being sort of left too long, and then other people need to act fast, but they too are being overburdened. So once it gets to the third person who actually needs to reply, it needs to be there at Monday on 9 a.m. But yes, that's then not being done, because of course a person doesn't work or feels he needs to be working. So I think it creates this kind of trickle-down effect, reducing not so much activity, creating more activity because it's becoming more urgent, but making us much less effective in where we want to go. So I think institutions, but also individuals, need to think about, well, what is really sort of the priority, the goal, what's the best way to achieve this, what kind of processes do we need to implement, etc., to get there, so that we sort of, and we do that for so many things. We are thinking about what are the most effective processes. We are sharing things about open data, open science, to be able to see the raw data and to see what kind of processes work best. So why not being open about working processes and sort of really seeing what works, what doesn't work, what creates most effective, and still, of course, workable and human relationships too, right? We're not machines either, as I think we all know.
I think, just like Anna mentioned, I think many of our PIs are heavily loaded. You are your boss, but you are the worst boss for yourself sometimes. But I think on the other hand, as we choose this to be an academic leader or to do research, because most likely because we like this work, right? So I think to be flexible by ourselves is very important. So the institutional rules can be helpful, but they don't essentially change balance your work and life. So it's still the inner balance. So in our case, I think to build a mutual understanding and trust within the team is very important. So every one of us, we are flexible. So for example, your team member can have a new baby, and he need to go back to his country for a month. No, it's quite fine. And for interview, go to the home country, it's okay. But when they work, they have their intrinsic motivation to work hard at their own time. It's not pressed, but we discussed with the YACA yesterday about intrinsic motivation or transactional motivation. So because we all have the motivation to publish the paper with your team member and as a PI, I thought it was intrinsic motivation, right? The YACA defined it as still a transactional motivation because there's profit. In his case, for example, his PhD students, when he published papers, he doesn't even put the boss name on the paper, which I learned from Akno on the trip, on the flight here. So I was not aware of this. So in this scenario, I think it's an intrinsic motivation. So you do many things due to your responsibility or out of your conscience. So this is very hard to be intrinsic. So I try to make effort to be this.
I'd just like to add to what Brigitte, I don't know how to pronounce said. So I think the problem is often I think it's our age. This time, we are at all levels. We see that we cannot say no to things, to opportunities. There are many more opportunities than there used to be. And I think even PhD students cannot say no. We as researchers, you have the possibility to apply to this project, to that project, to that. You want to try all of them because like Joanna said, sometimes probability that you will get it is very low, but then you do get it and then you are overburdened. And also I think the universities as a whole, they have so many ambitions, what they want to be enrolled in this, in EUTOPIA, in that project, in this co-found scheme, in that one. So it is so many things that we are now like internet. You can have, you have so many opportunities to make networks, to do something, and then we just cannot say no. So sometimes it's not difficult to say no to other people, but to yourself, to opportunities that you say, no, I have this great opportunity, I could work on this, but this will just spread myself too thin, and then I cannot do anything. So I do face this problem that I'm in too many things, and it is just because of this. I cannot say no to myself, basically.
Now, in the spirit of limiting and boundaries, and also judging by the faces of our audience, I think it's time to maybe move on to any possible final thoughts or questions from you guys or on this end of the round table before we conclude the session. Okay, done. There are drinks outside, which is another reason to leave this room.